Well, good morning and welcome to The Well. If you haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Danny. I am one of the pastors here at our church and just excited and glad that you're here, that you're in worship with us today. Especially, again, if this is your first time, it takes a lot of courage to come and to try a new church or any church at all. And so we're just glad that you would trust us, take that leap of faith and come into worship with us here this Sunday. And as the screen says, we're in a sermon series right now talking about love. It's called Rebranding Love, but we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're not trying to create something new, but we're trying to look at what the biblical authors, Jesus himself, what those who are writing about the ideas of love, a complex, big topic, like what were the things that they were trying to preach to and talk to and the points that they were trying to get across? Because I've said before, like the English language can be a little bit dull, but when we read the word love, there's many Hebrew and Greek words that are being used in our biblical text that I think if we dive into the original meaning of those, we can actually get a little bit more of context for what it means to love and to love well. And so last week we talked about agape love, which is probably more famous of all of the Greek words in Scripture used for love. It's kind of a sacrificial love that we see from God on our behalf, but we also see it in friendships and marriages and parental relationships. It's kind of a love that floats around in many different ways. But today we're going to be talking about what I think is perhaps the most elusive form of love, like one of the hardest things, especially as adults, to capture and to find. The older we get, the harder it is, and that is friendship love. And the Greek word for this is philia. And so if you look at it on the screen, it's friendship, companionship, brotherly love. And you might hear the word and like your ears perk up like philia. That sounds quite familiar. Like why does this sound familiar? Yeah, you would think Philadelphia, right? The city of brotherly love. So you may not know this, that Philadelphia is a combination of two Greek words, philia and adolphos, brotherly, companionship, sisterly love, and another word for like friendship, companion, person. So Philadelphos, Philadelphia, we get this idea. And it's not because they're like abundantly nice people in Philadelphia. It is because when they were founded, they're like, we want to have an ideal of being a place known for our friendship, known for how we love each other, known for this philia kind of love. And actually, like if you look back into the original like study of Greek philosophy, Plato, and the idea of like platonic love comes from him, and he was looking at like philia love. He was saying like this is actually the greatest form of love because it's not romantic, it's not sexual, it's purely like seeking the best for someone regardless of anything else. That this philia love is the ultimate version of companionship and friendship and all of that. And so we're going to be looking at this today. And if you would humor me, I think Philippe said this, like underneath your seats, there are, underneath 8 seats, I'd actually say, there are Ziploc bags with friendship bracelet things. Feel free to like grab those, like make one in your aisle. And here's the thing, there's letters in there. You can use them to make the points of the words that we're talking about. You can make someone's name and give it to someone. Maybe you don't have all the letters you need in your packet. Be a friend. Share it with someone next to you. This is a great opportunity to practice what we're preaching, but these are in your aisle. You don't have, I'm like real hard to focus, and so I gave you what I would need to focus, and maybe you don't need it, like keep it away from me. But if you want to make something, it's not distracting, please dive in and do that. Share it up, back, across the aisles, like whatever you feel like doing. And as you do that, here's what I want you to think about. And you can like close your eyes, you can keep your eyes open, but think about like someone you would classify as a Hall of Fame friend for you. Maybe it was like your childhood best friend, maybe it's someone now, maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's a sibling. Like I don't know what that is, but think about like your Hall of Fame friend and what makes them that for you. I actually shot a text to my high school childhood best friend this week, and I was like, hey, Nathan, I know we haven't talked in a while. Like we stay in contact, mostly in text. He lives in Oregon, I live here. And I was like, what do you think made us best friends for so long? And we went back and forth, and some of it was like proximity. We're like, well, we played a lot of sports together growing up, so we were forced to be together. Some of it was like, well, you were there for me when I had a really hard time, and like that forged a bond. We went to church together, we played sports together, and a lot of it was that. And I imagine for you, like when you think about this person that's a Hall of Fame friend, that there's a couple of things that maybe pop into your mind. Maybe like they showed up for you in a really hard time. Like you think about this, they were like this show up person. You were in the lowest of lows, the valley of your moment, and they showed up, and like this forged a huge bond for you. Maybe they were someone that is just like really like the life of the party, and like the person, like you call them and like, hey, I'm gonna do something, and they don't need to know the details. They're like, I am going with you to this thing right now, and it doesn't matter. And like they're the kind of show up, life of the party kind of person. Maybe they just made you feel comfortable in your own skin. Like that for me and my childhood best friend, like one of the things that made our friendship so strong is now in our mid-30s, whenever we come back together and when we were in our teens and 20s, like we just felt very comfortable being ourselves. We felt normal being goofy or nerdy or sporty or whatever it was, asking dumb questions as we became more like involved in the world, like sharing our beliefs on things and trusting and believing our friend wasn't going to turn their back on us. Like there was a comfortability in our own skin. And I imagine for you, like your best of best friend, like this Hall of Fame person, maybe has all of those things for you. Maybe they're the person that shows up when you want to go have fun. Maybe they're the person that makes you feel comfortable in your own skin. Maybe there's someone that you really, really trust. Like I imagine for you, like that person, if you have them, they're quite wonderful to think about. And maybe you don't have that person. I think that's actually a big reality for many of us. I was thinking about like myself, we live in a world where we're like very connected to people. We're surrounded by a lot of people. I was thinking just in terms of social media, like I have something like 1,500 friends on Facebook and like 750 friends on Instagram, and I think I have like 16,000 followers on TikTok, and I like know almost none of these people, right? Like I don't feel connected to any of these people, but there are times where I'm like, oh, like I feel like I have this big community around me, right? I feel this huge group of people that are around me, but if like the hardest part of my life came up, would I direct message someone from TikTok? Would I reach out to someone on Instagram? Like probably not, right? I would want someone that is like truly a friend. And the older we get, I think it's easier to be surrounded by people, but it's much harder for us to find friends. And I found some quotes that I thought like very perfectly summed up adult friendships at least. One of them was you spend your whole day with people that you would never have hung out with and that you didn't choose, but your children chose each other and you're hanging out by no other criteria other than your kids are the same height. Like that sometimes feels true to me, right? Like I'm at my kid's soccer game and I'm like, I didn't really choose any of you people. I like you, but I didn't really choose any of you people. Another one was this, my wife sent me this earlier this week and it made me laugh. She said, adult friendships are really just shooting off semi-regular texts saying, yes, I'm not dead yet, and can we arrange to hang out in 4 to 6 weeks, right? That sometimes feels what adult friendships are like. Like, hey, can I just get on your calendar sometime? Like, could we do, I'm not dead, I'm around, I'm hanging out, like, could we get this on our calendar? And I would say for many of us, like as hard as they are, we also realize how valuable they are. And I think there's a lot of things that make them really hard, but I think, again, we all understand the value of them. And so what I wanted to do today was kind of twofold. One, both talk about like why friendship is valuable. I think there is a little bit of a thing as we get older, we get sucked into our career, we get sucked into parenting, we get sucked into whatever, and we're like, I'll make friends later. Or maybe the most important thing is my work or it is my family. And sometimes we neglect the people that are around us. So I want to talk about like a biblical framework for like why friendship is actually valuable. And then I want to look in to see what might actually be some tips for us as we go about making friends. Like how can we do this in a way that honors ourselves, honor God, and surrounds us with people that can help us in this journey of life together. And the first and foremost thing I would say, like when we're looking at why friendship is important, I think we were designed to be in community. Like when God created humanity, it was a creation that was meant to be done together. Like we weren't meant to journey this life alone. And I would also say like there are many of us that fall on the spectrum of extroversion to introversion, and some of us that like to recharge alone and like to recharge together, like to be the life of the party and like to just hang out on the walls. Like that's a different sort of thing. That's a different conversation. But the reality I think is whether we're introverted or extroverted, like God did create us to be around other people. And we actually see this early on in the creation story. If you go to the first book of the Bible, into Genesis chapter 2, you see it saying this, says, God said, it's not good for the human to be alone, so I'll make a helper that is perfect for him. Now, what you may not know is this isn't like a marital gender statement as much as this is a community statement. This is something that from the beginning, God is being like, it is not good for human to be alone. It's not good for us to be alone. And the Greek word used for helper, or the Hebrew word used for helper, is this word ezer. And what's interesting is that oftentimes, like we think about this word, and like this is a gendered thing, right? So the woman is the helper. This is, and many times, like in churches that talk about this, they talk about gender roles. Like man was created the head of the household, and then the ezer was created, the woman, to be the helper and be the supplement. That's not actually what's happening here. And the Hebrew word for ezer is used 2 times in a gendered way in the Old Testament, but I think it's used like 13 times to talk about the supporting power warrior nature of God, that like God shows up and walks alongside and like helps fight battles with you. And when I think about this, like this isn't really like an idea of man and woman, or this is an idea of like who supports who. This is an idea of like in the best form of community, we were never meant to do it alone. And sometimes we need that person that's going to go into like battle with us, so to speak. And that's not like battle to fight people, but you've been in those low times in your life and those hard times, and you've had the people, and the people that are the most helpful to be with you, we read about in Genesis, are the ones that are your Ezers, the ones that are your helpers, that go into that rough place with you and help you get out the other side. And that language that God uses for the helper, the Ezer, the person that's going in this, isn't just about us, but again, it's used 90% to talk about God and the character of God throughout the Old Testament. And so this is a character identity trait of God, someone that goes into the hard place with us. And as we were created and designed to live in community, like that is the best way for us to initially show friendship, is to be in community so close that we can go into these hard places. And I think that's why philia love is so important, right? That it's companionship, it's brotherly, sisterly love, friendship love that goes with us into not just the good times, but it goes into it with the hard times. And you've had those friends, right? You've had the people that you're like, this is my best friend. And then something really hard happens and they're like, nowhere to be found. Like, and that person can still be a good friend, but there's a type of friend that helps you and walks with you in the deepest levels of your hardship and your good times. Like that sort of Ezer, that sort of community is the reason that friendship is important, and one of the reasons that I think friendship is so hard, because it asks a lot of us, but it also asks a lot of the people that are next to us to journey with us in that. But community is ultimately very, very important, but it's not just that. I think friendship ultimately, and especially like philia love friendship, it encourages us and it lifts us up. One of the hardest things about life as an adult is I would describe it as a hamster wheel that I'm just always on. And I'm still trying to figure out if I can get off of it, but I tend to not be able to. But what I found to be true is like more stuff keeps getting handed to me as I'm running on this treadmill. Like I'm not getting off it, and it's not getting any lighter, but more stuff is getting handed to me along the way. And one of the reasons friendship is important from like a biblical standpoint is we see that when people were in those times where they were stuck in the hamster wheel, when they were in the heavy times, friends at their best were the ones that helped shoulder the burden and carry part of that load so that they didn't have to carry it alone. And I just said at my brother's wedding, I preached at his wedding and kind of shared this, and they asked me to share a scripture for them, like something that was important. And maybe I mentioned this, my brother grew up Christian, but his wife is Jewish. And so I was like, well, let's pick a scripture from the Old Testament, something that like resonate with both of them. And so I chose a passage from Ecclesiastes, one you may have heard at a wedding before, but it says this. It's Ecclesiastes 4:9-10. It says, 2 are better than one because they have a good return for their hard work. If either of them should fall, one can pick up the other. But how miserable are those who fall and don't have a companion to help them up. And again, this is kind of like that Ezer sort of companion, like the person that helps carry and work with you in this. And it goes on to talk about like a cord of 3, like you, your friend, and God is like not easily broken. And this book is really interesting because it's written by a guy named Solomon, and he's searching for wisdom everywhere. Like the whole point of Ecclesiastes is to try to figure out how to find happiness and where to find it. And he goes through all these different ways. Is it partying? Is it money? What is it? Is it different like knowledge? What is it? And one of the places that he finds the best opportunity for hope in this book is in the community that we have together, and the ability for us in community and friendship to be able to shoulder certain burdens with one another, to carry it. And I think friendship at its best is that, right? Like it's not just being present for someone physically, like standing with them, sitting with them, but being present with them in the times where they can't carry certain things on their own, where they need help and they need to go. Like think of your best friend. They probably have helped you move before. Like that's a unique type of friend. People text me and they're like, hey, can you help me move? I'm like, oh man, I'm out of town for the 34th consecutive week, right? Like it's a big task to want to help someone move. But I also have one friend that has shown up every time I've moved without me asking. And I'm blown away. I'm like, are you sick? Like, what's happening? Like, why are you doing this? But he does it because he wants so deeply to help shoulder what he knows is the most stressful burden. And what's quite interesting is he's moved several times and he's never asked anyone to help him move. But people have showed up for him because he has helped shoulder burdens in the same sort of way. And like that kind of friend that shoulders and carries burdens is really, really important. So it's not just like who we were designed to be, but it helps like lighten the load and the burden of life as we walk in friendship with one another. But ultimately, and maybe the most important thing about friendships is I think the best kind, and you might know this kind of friend, like they help you truly become who you were created to be. Like be comfortable in your own skin. Like God didn't create us to walk around with like shame and guilt and look at ourselves with disgust. And our best friends are the kind of the ultimate hype men, right? Like the people that walk behind us like, you know what, you are rocking it today. You know what, those jeans do look great on you. You know what, you are crushing it in your job. Like those kind of friends that like gas you up and like give you help and give you community in that sort of way are the kind that really help you feel comfortable in your skin and start to believe that like God intentionally created you in a good way. Because sometimes I think it's easy to forget that truth. Like maybe God messed up when they created me. Like I look around and everyone else seems like they have stuff together. Like maybe God skipped me or was looking away on the conveyor belt of creation and like put the wrong thing. Like I might have been a mess up, right? But our best of friends help point to that truth that like we are intentionally and wonderfully made people in the image of God, and they help us become who we're created to be. And one of my favorite books in the Bible, though we haven't spent much time teaching on it here, is the book of Proverbs. And Proverbs is great because it's like the initial, it was Twitter before Twitter existed, right? It was like the original attempt to put wisdom into 140 characters or less. And it was better than Twitter at it, I would say. And it was quite good. And one of my favorite Proverbs comes from Proverbs 27:17. It says, as iron sharpens iron, a person sharpens a friend. And I don't know how much you know about like blacksmithing, but like you take like a piece of steel, right? And you heat it up and you like hammer it and it starts to like get beaten up and then starts to like look more like what it's going to create it to be. But it doesn't get completed in one, so it gets cooled down and then heated up and kind of hit again. And this is kind of the analogy that the author of Proverbs is getting at, that like friendship helps us, not beat us up in a negative way, but helps like shape and conform us through life experience as we like hit up against one another, as we do life together, as we correct one another, as we walk with one another, as we do life together, as we share friendship bracelet pieces, like we sharpen the iron of the other person. And that's what this passage in Proverbs is trying to get at. I think actually an integral part of helping be a good friend. Like if you've ever tried to be a good friend, the tension you have in your friendship is like, how real can I be with this person? Like you probably had that struggle, right? Like, am I allowed to say this to this person? And for you, like it might come across negative, but you're like, I'm actually trying to say this very lovingly. And I think about my childhood friend, Nathan. Like what made us really good friends is we were able to have a very iron sharpens iron relationship. Like we were on different sides of political spectrums, we were on different sides of social issues, our theology was quite different, but we had this like friendship that stuck together and has continued to stand the test of time because we have been able to enter into this kind of iron sharpens iron friendship where we share where we think we're getting it right, we share where we might think the other person's getting it wrong, and ultimately we are more refined in that process. And I think friendship as a whole should be a place where we're not afraid to share the things that are on our heart because we believe that the person across from us will receive it with grace. But maybe more importantly, the person giving it is not giving it out of malicious intent, but giving it out of grace as well. And I think those are important parts of friendship, right? That understanding they're important because we were created for this, that it helps us become more comfortable in our skin, and ultimately as we journey life, it like makes life less heavy. Like you feel the burden literally lifted off your shoulders. But I would say like the bigger question for many of us is like, that's great. Those are all wonderful things. I believe it. Great. That's why we should have friends. Well, how do I make friends? Like that's a question that many of us ask. Like, well, then how do I cultivate friends? And I don't know the answer. Like really, I think it's pretty hard to make friends. But I could give you what I think are little postures that we might be able to possess that help us actually walk down this a little bit more. And the first thing I would say is like cultivating trust is hard. But to create friendship, I think it has to start with cultivating trust. C.S. Lewis said this. He said, friendship is born in the moment when a person says to another, what? You too? I thought I was the only one. like you've had that moment, right? Like in really weird things, but also in normal things, right? Like this idea, I was hanging out with someone from the Well last night, and we were talking about a TV show that had just come out. Does anyone know about the TV show Fallout? Anyone heard of this one? It's pretty intense, but we were talking about this, and like we were talking about like, hey, like you know this too, right? It's like a little bit niche enough still, where like not everyone might know about it. Like, hey, and like that was a friendship kind of moment, right? And when we have the more of those we have, like we start to cultivate trust. But the question is like, how do we do that? And for us to be in that moment, like we had to have a trusting moment to be like, you know what? I can be like Fallout level nerdy right now and share this part of myself. Or I can like share this side. Like trust is scary, but I don't think we can really have friendship unless we embrace trust, right? It's the first and foremost kind of a hallmark of creating, especially this philia, this brotherly love, this sisterly love, this companionship sort of thing. But the second thing would be like, I think we have to really attempt to embrace vulnerability. Like that's a big thing. And that's a pretty like, buzzword in psychology and church, and like I've heard a lot about vulnerability, but like what does that actually mean? And it's a hard thing to embrace, like being able to walk into a space and fully be yourself, to allow someone else to fully be themselves. Like trust is one thing, being able to feel like you can share things, but I think we all feel different shades of weird. And that's kind of if I was going to write a working definition of vulnerability, it's like allowing yourself to be the most weird you possibly can in any given moment is kind of what vulnerability feels like. Like being able to be fully yourself and allow the person next to you to receive that. And the other side would be creating space for that. And there's a Christian practitioner and author, his name is Henry Nouwen, and he does a lot of work on vulnerability stuff, a quite wonderful person. And he had something that he said that I thought was quite wonderful. He said this: a friend who can be silent with us in a moment of despair or confusion, who can stay with us in an hour of grief or bereavement, who can tolerate not knowing, not healing, not curing, that is a friend who truly cares. And when I think about like vulnerability is like not in pursuit of an answer or a solution, as Nouwen says, like curing or fixing or healing, but it's just like creating space to exist. And if you've never like read any of Henry Nouwen's work or seen, like that's like what he is abundantly good at. It's like creating space for individuals to heal and to just be themselves in a world that does not often allow us to be ourselves. But I think as important as trust is, like being able to create spaces where we can actually be 100% vulnerable and authentic in ourselves, receive that and to give that are ultimately important. And the last step is, I think, perhaps the most practical and the easiest and the least amorphous. You got to take a leap of faith. To like friendship is like you got to jump into it. Every friendship that I've ever looked back on, that I've ever made, there was a moment where I said, am I going to talk to this person or not? Am I going to go over to their house or not? Like, am I going to invite them to hang out or not? Am I going to do something? Like, there is always that tension in that moment where we say, am I going to do this or not? And I would say when we look about building friendships, like trust is important and vulnerability is important, believing we were created to be in community is important, shouldering each other's burdens is important. All of those things are wonderful things to do. But unless we take a step in trust and a step in faith forward, we can't embrace it. And I think that's like not only a principle for friendship, it's probably a principle for all of life. But when we think about cultivating friendship, it is abundantly important for us to take that first step and to allow others to be our friends, but to step into friendship together. And the reason that we talk about this goes back to the first reason of biblically why this is important, is that we were created to be in community together. The reason we talk about friendship in church is ultimately because we think that it is a step to fully embracing the life that God designed us to live, which is one that is not in isolation alone. It's not where we feel like the burdens of life are heavy, but it's where we embrace the weirdness, the messiness, the awkwardness, the joy, the happiness that comes in a life lived together. And so my greatest hope for us would be that as like we are a community of individuals, as we are a church together, that this space on a Sunday morning would be a place that is like known for its friendship, like a place that is known for being friendly. but also a place that is known for when you leave this space on a Sunday, that friendships continue, that relationships are cultivated. For those that feel like they don't have friends, they not only find a friend in God, but they find a friend in those of us here. Those of us outside these walls, that like we are friends without agenda. Like your goal is to not create friends to bring them to church on Sunday, but to be the people that God designed you to be, so that they can feel comfortable being the people that God designed them to be. Like friendship has real life implications everywhere. And I think about like the ripple effect of what our community would look like if we embrace that kind of friendship everywhere. Like how different Weldon Spring or St. Charles County or the entire metro area of St. Louis would look like if friendship rooted in the person and the power of Jesus actually like transformed and guided our lives. And my hope is that step could start today. Like we can all take that sort of leap of faith into embracing the importance of friendship, both here and now and outside these walls. And so with that in mind, would you say a prayer with me? God, I do thank you that you first and foremost showed us what friendship looked like through your relationship with us, but also through the relationship Jesus had with those around him, his friends and his disciples, the friendships that you're modeling in our lives in this space and outside these walls. And I just ask that as difficult as it is for us to navigate and find and cultivate friendships, that you might create pathways for us to be able to embrace and develop and to walk down those. Maybe nudge us in the times we're feeling uncertain and nervous to take a leap of faith. Challenge us and nudge us when it's time to listen instead of talk. When it's time to help shoulder burdens instead of be the fun person. When it's time to help other people realize that they were created wonderfully in the image of God and strip away the shame that maybe the world has told them about themselves. Like, help us ultimately be reflections of your light and your goodness everywhere we are. And so that for those that feel like there is no friend, they find a friend in you and a friend in us. And so be with us as we continue to worship, as we sing, and as we prepare our hearts for communion. Pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.